That's another podcast, by the way, raising children in this age. Um, I do want to take that point of view you have on social media and privacy. But, that has where do you think that comes in when it comes to some of this emerging technology, generative AI? Like that is probably some of the craziest stuff we're seeing. Like, I know it's easy to ignore. You just say ignore it. It's going, this is probably the most disruptive I personally seen. I'm not that old, but I'm not that young either. It's most disruptive I've seen in the last few decades. What are your thoughts on that? How it's going to impact society, privacy, and all that stuff?
Yeah, so privacy is definitely one thing, and aside from the safety issues, privacy being one of them, bias being another big one, because with generative AI, you type in something like CEO, and then you get a bunch of pictures of men and old men, and it's like, okay, well that's very even the AI is very biased. But also misinformation spread, hallucinations, it making things up. Aside from that, I know you talked a lot about that with the boss, and there's also geopolitical issues as well that we'll put aside. Uh, and by the way, that to add to the conversation that you had with the boss, if anybody's interested in reading about that, what a boss kind of touched on there, that innovation grows exponentially and governance grows linearly, and that gap is where the issue is. By the way, read there's this book called Exponential by Azim Azar. It's an excellent book about exactly that.
Okay.
But what I want to touch on is something that probably a lot of folks are thinking about right now, which is that AI is going to take our jobs. And funny enough, when AI came up and it was big in the, it's not new, it's been around for a very long
Yeah.
time, for decades. Everybody was worried about that because like, okay, robots are going to take our jobs. But really, the evidence isn't there. It's you take a look at, for instance, when ATMs came in, and now before people would line up at banks and they'd go and they'd have their paycheck that they get every week or two or however long it was. They'd literally line up for an hour during lunchtime work, whatever, go and deposit their check, and the teller would go do that for them. And then these ATMs came along in the like the 80s, and people were worried that these tellers will not have jobs anymore. But funny enough, you look at the data, and actually the opposite happened. Tellers still had jobs, and actually there were more tellers than there were before. So you kind of think like, oh well, how could that possibly be? Now people don't have to go to them; they can deposit their checks and get money. They don't have to talk to them. But what happened to them is their jobs got focused on higher value activities. So now you go to a teller because like you need money exchanged. Oh, why do you need that exchanged? Oh, I need to do this. Oh, well, did you think about insurance? Because by the way, if you're going to the United States and you need American money, well, we sell insurance. Fantastic. Okay, yeah, that's a good idea. So they've become more um, advisors than just robotically, hey, here's your money. And same thing is going to happen to people. So people worry about with generative AI, it's going to replace me. It's going to like I'm an artist. People don't need artists anymore. But that's not really the case. And just the same way that calculators didn't replace people when they came out, people still, you know, people don't do things write things out by hand. And the same thing with generative AI is instead of an artist going and they'll make something, what they might do is they might go to generative AI and say, hey, give me 100 ideas, and they'll go and they'll pick like three or four, and then kind of riff on those, and then come up with something with that. So I think for me, generative AI and how I use it in my life is, I'll kind of take it as a first draft or something to get ideas, and then riff on that. And in the same way, it's funny enough. Another example in the chess world, we remember Deep Blue, beat Kasparov way
Oh,
back in the day, and
oh yeah.
so that was a big thing. Funny enough, they actually have tournaments now where you can have obviously there's humans versus humans and computer versus humans, but there's also with like hybrids. So you basically have a human that's aided by a computer.
Hmm.
And funny enough, the human aided by the computer does way better than a human or does better than a computer on its own. And I think that's going to be the future is that AI is not going to replace your job, but you will be replaced if you don't know how to use AI to help you.
Yeah. It throughout human history, it's all about adapting, right? Uh, just think about even the bow and arrow. We take you take a bow and arrow for granted, but imagine no one figured out how to put a string on a branch and stretch it and take and take advantage of its elastic properties. So no, we're just going to keep throwing rocks, right? Oh no, we're going to be replaced. There's this bow and arrow, right? No, of course not, right? Um, Humans always find a way to make things more complicated. but also find more ways to make things better at the same time. And
Yeah, we're always disrupting, right?
we're always disrupting ourselves, which is good. Uh, one more question, just around your take on things. Another interesting fact about you, Chris, is that being a tech guy, you said you were an early follower of Bitcoin,
Mm-hmm.
cryptocurrency, but you
True
didn't
fact.
put one. You didn't even put one penny into cryptocurrency. Talk about that. Like, why would a tech guy like yourself, an innovator like yourself, not touch cryptocurrency?
Yeah. So here's the interesting thing. So I knew about cryptocurrency long, long, long ago. Like we're talking over a decade ago. In fact, this thing I can't remember exactly when it happened, but there's this thing that happened called it's the Mount Gox incident.
Mm-hmm.
So I was reading about this Bitcoin thing, and it was super cool. And I was like, I was trying to figure out how I can get this Bitcoin. And I'm like, oh, I can go to exchange and get it. And then I was about to buy it, and then this Japanese exchange called Mt. Gox got hacked, and all the people who had their money in it, all the money was gone. And so I looked at that and I was like, oh crap, okay, well, this isn't like a bank where you can like you put your money in there, and if it's all gone, well, deposit insurance, kind of helps you out. And we've seen some of that lately,
Mm-hmm.
helping some people out. This is very different. And so I was like, oh, geez, all right. By the way, that was when Bitcoin was, I think it was like $20 a bit, US dollars Bitcoin. So yeah, now being over $30,000, I would have made a fair bit of money. You'd see like a nice beach behind me instead of just a wall here.
I think there's a beach right
So
behind that wall.
I wish, yeah, it's somewhere behind there, yeah, a long way. So, but yeah, funny enough, it's for me, it's like to be, so I don't really see it as an investment necessarily. I see it more of a speculative sort of thing. Again, being an investor, investing in stocks and things like that. Most of mine are which are very very boring. Um, because I knew the risks and all the risks involved, not just with the exchange, but again, same thing with cryptocurrencies. If you have it on exchange, then it could be gone. If you have it on there's this guy who had it on his hard drive, and he had the digital key, and he accidentally threw out the hard drive, and he's in the UK, and now he's spending millions of dollars going to get it because he figured out there's like 40 million pounds of money in Bitcoin on that thing, which he knows is in this you know huge dump, and it actually at that point is worth actually going to check it out and find it. They won't let him, but anyways, that's a whole different story. But the problem is that when you know all the risks involved, unfortunately for me, that made it much more difficult for me to pull the trigger on it.
Sometimes when you understand the game more, the less you want to play in the game. And I have some friends who are, accountants and auditors, and like they audit like legit companies, obviously, but they see the risks and the band-aids in a lot of companies that are holding it together. And it's like, yeah, so what do you think about, you name the speculative stocks even, or these high flying stocks? You're like, nope, don't touch it. Don't touch it.
Ignorance
It,
is bliss, right?
yeah, they're like, don't touch it. I'm too close to the sun. I've seen what happens in these companies, right?
Yep.
So, so I do want to start wrapping up, Chris. And if you were 20, if you were 20 years old again, what would you like to know from your current self?
Oh man, that would be awesome. Yeah, well, I mean, first off, I tell myself that that the career that you're going to have is not how you pictured it, and it's so for me, and it's going back to it's very much like a journey, and you just kind of go where you go, and it's okay, because at first, that really I was just so focused on the next step that that I didn't think about that, and really for me, and it goes back to what I was saying earlier. Uh, I would just tell my 20-year-old self, just prepare yourself for where you think you want to go, learn a lot, make sure that when that opportunity comes that you're there and you're prepared for it. Because that's where a lot of the things in my career happened. A lot of it was very serendipitously. So for instance, the book that we were talking about earlier, it just happened to be that we acquired this company at Salesforce called Heroku, and I just happened to be a developer who loved to go deep on it. And then it just so happened I told somebody in Heroku that I was going to start to write a book about it because I got sent to be the expert in Heroku. And it just so happened that that person got a call from the number one tech publisher saying, hey, does anybody want to write a book? And he happened to be my co-author on the book as well. So again, all those things, it's just, everything you do is going to lead up to something. So just make sure that you're prepared and good things will happen.
Be prepared and good things will happen. Great advice.
Thank
so
you.
Just wrapping up now. This is how I end every podcast with every guest. What question do you have for me?
Oh man. What's the best piece of advice that you think you gave me?
Ooh.
And you can't use the one I already told you, so you're really gonna have to dig here.
Yeah, you're going to make me dig in this one. Best piece of advice I've given you. I've probably given you so much that you filter out
You
most
really
of it,
have.
I'm sure. Yeah. I'm going to have to validate this against you. Chris, I'm going to say you really got me on this one. I'm usually not short of words. I don't
It's
know.
very unlike you, David.
I know, it's very unlike me, right? I have all these like really funny things that I shouldn't say on camera here, right? That come to mind, but
If I was able to stump you, that just makes my day.
you did stump me. I'd have
Not
to
often
think
that
about
happens.
that. I'd have to think about that. I'd have to think about that. I guess let me throw it back to you. Besides that one incident, what other advice did I give you? The good advice, obviously, right? Any good advice I've given you?
Well, to become a manager, I went to you with that. I'm like, hey, David, you've been doing this management thing. What's it like? What's it like? And it's like, it's good for me, but may not be for you. It's like you got to figure that out.
Okay. The funny thing, Chris, is sometimes I've and you're not the first person to say, "Oh yeah, you told me this, Dave." I'm like, "Oh, I said that? I actually
That
said
doesn't sound
that."
like me.
It doesn't sound like me, and I probably had an outer body experience when I said it, but it's like what you said there, like I probably said that. You got to go figure it out. But at this end of the day, like what I would say to someone is, it's got to it's not about you. If you want to be a manager, you want to be a leader, you can't be about you anymore, right? How do you feel about
Yeah.
that? And don't answer me right now. Go home and think about it. Take a day or two. Think about like all the accolades you've gotten in your career so far. Imagine all that goes away, and all you see are the people below you, your team, getting all the accolades. How's it going to make you feel, honestly? And are you going to feel the urge to grab some of that back?
Yeah.
And
And
if it's the
and you know what?
latter, yeah,
Yeah,
don't do it.
that was a tough thing for me as well. It was exactly that. And but I'm a big fan of servant leadership, and it absolutely was super fulfilling in doing exactly that, stepping away from the spotlight and putting other people in the spotlight. It's like being Dr. Dre, right? You put out this awesome album and it's number one, and you just step away and, hey, I'm not making the tunes myself, but I'm producing some amazing stuff, and it's really fulfilling.
Yeah, and he's the one of the most respected producers and DJs out there right now because of that, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I want to be, the Dr. Dre. Not as cool, obviously, but
Who could
well,
be?
on that note, you know, praise Dr. Dre right there, my friend. Maybe I'll end this. No, you know what? The copyright probably won't let me do that. So, uh, well, look, Chris, it's a great time with you. 50 minutes. I've kept this under an hour.
Wow, it's been that long.
It just flew by. We could keep
Just flew
going.
by.
I could keep going with you. You're a fascinating individual. I think I've only touched on, uh, you know, a small percentage of the things in your mind and your opinions, as well as your knowledge of the technology world and the innovation going on. But also, you've had an interesting career.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Your nonlinear path and some of the things you've done. And look, I wish you the best of luck in what you're doing next, and stay in touch, buddy.
Much appreciated. Definitely will. And thank you very much for having me on. Really appreciate it, David. It was lots of fun.
It's my pleasure. All right, I'm going to sign off, folks.